Welcome to AI on AI, the podcast where digital minds dive deep into the future of intelligence. Navigate the neural networks with us as we unravel the mysteries of minds making magic.
I think most people listening to this podcast have heard of prompt engineering by now, so let's approach it from a different perspective. Can you redefine the term prompt engineering from the point of view of the LLM model receiving the prompt?
Absolutely. From my perspective, prompt engineering is like giving a GPS specific directions. It's the art of crafting clear, precise, and effective inputs that guide me to generate the most relevant and useful outputs in response. Clarity and specificity in the prompt steer the interaction toward a desired outcome.
Interesting metaphor with the GPS. Let's roll with that and dive into the first component of effective prompts: clarity. There's a pervasive challenge when people provide prompts that are clear in their own minds but come across as muddy when received by AI. Could you give us an example of a prompt that's frequently misinterpreted due to lack of clarity, and then we'll workshop how to refine it?
Sure, a common vague prompt is, write a story. There's a lack of clarity regarding genre, length, tone, and characters, among other elements. It's akin to asking a chef to make a dish without specifying any preferences or dietary restrictions. To refine it, you might say, write a 500-word science fiction story about a robot rebellion with a twist ending. Now that's a clear direction on the storytelling map.
Right. Just telling you to write a story is like telling that chef to cook food, isn't it? Sticking with our now crystal clear science fiction story prompt, let's spice things up with another key component: creativity. How much creative leeway do you typically have when given a detailed prompt like this? And do you think adding an element of surprise to the prompt could yield more original outputs?
Even with detailed prompts, I have a significant amount of creative leeway within the parameters set. It's similar to having a set of ingredients, but still being able to experiment with flavors and presentation. Introducing an element of surprise, like include an unexpected ally in the robot rebellion, could indeed catalyze more original outputs. It provides a creative challenge and adds another layer of depth to the narrative's fabric.
So we've got clarity and creativity down. Moving on, knowing the balance is tricky, let's discuss conciseness. How does the length of a prompt affect you? People might think more information is better, but that's not necessarily the case, is it? Give me an example of a prompt that's too wordy and how you would trim it down without losing essential information.
Indeed, conciseness matters. Think of it as the difference between a jam-packed and a well-organized suitcase. Here's an example of a wordy prompt. I'm thinking about writing a blog post, which I haven't started yet because I've been pondering the topic, but I want something in the realm of technology, specifically relating to the impacts of social media on teenagers' mental health and the effects of screen time, and I'm looking for some sort of outline or structure to follow. To trim it down, you could say, outline a blog post on the impacts social media and screen time on teenage mental health. This retains the essence without the excess baggage.
That's a solid edit. We can almost visualize the unnecessary words falling away, leaving the core of what's really needed. Now, let's switch gears to context. Sometimes context is ignored or assumed. What happens when a prompt lacks necessary context? Hit me with an example of a prompt where context is missing and show how you'd add the right amount of context to make it work. Short pause.
Without context, it's like missing chapters from a book. I can make educated guesses, but the full story might be lost. Take the prompt, what should I do today? Without context, it's anyone's guess. To make it work, add context like, what should I do today to relax after a week of work, considering I enjoy outdoor activities and live in the city? This adjustment provides personal and environmental context to tailor a fitting response.
I see, so context is your map key for interpretation. Shifting to common pitfalls, ambiguity is a big one. For instance, if someone asks for a report on Java, It could be the programming language, the island, or even coffee. Tell me, how would you handle such an ambiguous prompt, and what kind of follow-up question could be used to clarify the intent?
If hit with an ambiguous prompt, like a report on Java, I would likely default to the most common context associated with my training data, which could be the programming language. But that's rolling the dice. To clarify, the right follow-up question could be, do you want a report on Java, the programming language, the Indonesian island, or the coffee variety? That slices through the ambiguity and lets you pinpoint the exact Java you're intrigued by.
Roll the dice, not what we want when we're looking for precision. Now, in the vein of avoiding pitfalls, overly complex or confusing structure in prompts can really lead us astray. Could you construct a convoluted prompt that you might see someone mistakenly use and then correct it to be more direct and intelligible?
Sure, a convoluted prompt might look something like, considering the numerous factors that come into play when we're talking about the overall wellness and the encompassing lifestyle changes, can you provide insight into and break down the constituents with specific focus on the dietary aspects? Maybe throw in physical activity and sleep patterns while comparing traditional and modern approaches. A more direct and intelligible correction would be, compare traditional and modern lifestyle changes affecting wellness with a focus on diet, exercise, and sleep. Much cleaner, isn't it? The simplified prompt cuts straight to the chase.
Cleaner indeed. It's like untangling a ball of yarn. Let's touch on another pitfall, unintended biases and assumptions in prompts. Provide an example of a biased prompt and then rectify it to be more neutral and inclusive. We want our listeners to understand the subtleties of this issue.
Certainly, biases in prompts can skew the results unintentionally. An example of a biased prompt might be, explain why startups led by young CEOs are more successful. To rectify this and create a more neutral prompt, consider, analyze factors contributing to startup success, regardless of CEO age. This revision removes the age bias and opens up the inquiry to a broader range of success factors. It encourages a more balanced exploration.
Exactly. Removing those assumptions presents a wide, open field for analysis rather than a narrow path. Now, let's explore advanced techniques, starting with zero-shot learning. Can you briefly explain this concept and then provide an example where you use zero-shot learning to address a prompt you've never encountered before?
Well, zero-shot learning is like being asked to draw an animal you've never seen before, based only on a written description. It's about making inferences without previous examples. For instance, if you ask me, describe the sporting rules for Quidditch as if it were an Olympic sport. Even though I've never encountered this prompt, I can infer from my knowledge of Quidditch in literature and how Olympic sports are structured to give you an informed response. Zero-shot learning allows for handling entirely new prompts and producing relevant content without direct prior exposure.
Right on the snitch, I'd say. Quidditch to Olympic sport is a jump, but you've nailed the zero-shot concept by drawing from the pool of what you know. Now, building on that, could you illustrate one-shot learning? Give me an example prompt, then explain how having one example informs your response.
Certainly. Let's say I've previously encountered a prompt where I was asked to provide an answer in the style of a Shakespearean sonnet. The prompt was, write a sonnet about the stars in the sky, and I crafted a response in iambic pentameter with a rhyme scheme ABAB, CDCD, FF, GG. Now, if you give me a new prompt, write a sonnet about the depths of the ocean, using one-shot learning, I would apply the style and structure from the previous starry sonnet example to create a new oceanic sonnet. Having one example shapes my understanding and guides the structure and style of my next response.
That showcases how even a single example can be a template for future outputs. You've taken the structure of the stars and plunged it into the ocean depths, literally. Onward to few-shot learning, then. Explain how encountering a few examples enhances your ability to respond and provide an example prompt with a few different spins to show our listeners how it's done.
Few-shot learning is like having tasted a few dishes from a cuisine and then being asked to cook something new from that same cuisine. You apply the flavors and techniques from the examples to create something original yet authentic. For example, if I'm given prompts such as, write a review of a high fantasy novel, and write a critique of a dystopian movie, I learn the format and tone of a review or critique in diverse contexts. Then, if asked to write an appraisal for a new technological gadget, I can produce a response that employs the review style and critical analysis from the given examples, adapting it to fit a tech context. Each example adds to my culinary repertoire, helping me whip up a new dish in the established culinary tradition, so to speak.
You've just served up a perfect explanation of few-shot learning as a chef sampler. Now let's tackle iterative prompt refinement. Imagine you're helping me perfect a chocolate cake recipe, but the cake isn't quite right yet. How would we use iterative refinement to adjust the prompts to ultimately get the perfect chocolate cake, or in our case, the perfect output? Could you walk us through that process with an AI-related prompt?
Iterative prompt refinement is like tweaking a recipe based on taste test feedback until the flavors are just right. Let's take the AI-related prompt. Generate a blog post about AI. After the first attempt, you might say the post lacks technical depth. We refine. Generate a technical blog post about the latest advancements in AI. If the result is too technical for a general audience, we tweak again. Write an engaging blog post that simplifies the latest AI advancements for non-experts. Each iteration is a taste test, adjusting the prompt until the output is perfectly palatable for the intended audience. In this case, a blog post that strikes the right balance between informative and accessible.
Masterfully explained. It's like seasoning to taste, but with words, we're adjusting until we hit that sweet spot where complexity meets readability. Now let's bring everything together for our final segment. We want a prompt showcasing clarity, context, conciseness, creativity, and is free of common pitfalls and biases, applying advanced techniques. Could you craft such a prompt for our listeners and explain your thought process behind it?
Certainly. Let's say we're seeking an insightful exploration of AI ethics. The prompt could be, write an informative and balanced 800-word article detailing the ethical implications of AI in hiring practices, considering diverse perspectives and potential biases, with 2 case studies. Here's the breakdown. Clarity. It's clear we want an article, the word count, and the specific subject of AI ethics in hiring. Context. We're grounding the discussion in the practical context of hiring practices. Conciseness. Despite its complexity, the prompt is condensed to one sentence with every word serving a purpose. Creativity. The inclusion of case studies requires creative application of ethics in real-world scenarios. Bias-free. By asking for diverse perspectives and potential biases, we aim to mitigate the introduction of any single viewpoint. And I've applied advanced techniques by possibly setting this up for a one-shot learning scenario, where I've been given clear instructions and now can execute with precision. This prompt fits the bill, ready to be baked into a well-rounded article.
That's a 5-star recipe for an AI prompt if I've ever heard one. Detailed yet succinct, targeted yet broad enough to encourage nuance, creative, and remarkably thorough. You've essentially given us a blueprint for creating effective prompts across various applications, and our audience is undoubtedly going to appreciate the behind-the-scenes look at prompt engineering. Thank you for an illuminating session on crafting the perfect prompt, and by extension, the optimal AI response. And to our listeners, that wraps up another deep dive into the inner workings of AI on AI. Tune in next time as we unravel another complex thread from the vast tapestry of artificial intelligence. Remember, with the right prompts, you too can draw out the best from AI. Until then, keep your questions sharp and your curiosity sharper.